Okay, thank you everyone to join this public training. Today's topic is ZK10 preview, Client MVVM. So today I will introduce some basic idea about the Client MVVM and in ZK10. The first is what's the difference between the client and server MVVM? For those MVVM we use before ZK10, we call it server MVVM. In order to differentiate the new feature, Client MVVM. So in a very short word, it's the difference between these two MVVM is we move the server-side binding and tracking to the client side. So, and it's transparent to application server mostly. And what is the server MVVM? Before ZK10, what we use is server MVVM. That is when you use the binding like low binding, say binding, or this byte, you will produce some tracker nodes and ZK will generate according to those binding relationships and some objects to record the binding between the component attribute and view model properties. So those information that ZK generated will store in the server side. So you can see here, that's what ZK generate to record the binding between these two parts. So if you use init, that doesn't produce tracker nodes. So this is how the server MVVM will do, because you will need to support two-way data binding. But in client MVVM, we push all of this binding related information to the client. So you will store into the browser. So that's the main differences. So it doesn't consume the server memory, but still the binding happens in the client side, but still you will communicate with the server when it's necessary. For example, when the client need to get the data from the server, or when you click a button, it's still fire event to the server. Then why we need client MVVM? The first benefit is to lower the memory consumption at the server. In order to provide a two-way data binding, ZK need to create lots of tracker nodes to remember the binding relationships between the view model property and component attributes. So those trackers will consume lots of memory when its number is increased. So for example, if you create 1,000 low binding, for example, in your Lakes box, then you will create these kind of these kind of objects. For example, the tracker nodes of 2,000, low binding, 1,000, reference binding. Such objects will consume lots of memories. But if we push these binding relationships to the client sides, then it's the browser will store these relations, so it doesn't consume the same memory. Surely that will depend on how many bindings on a page. So if you want to check, you can run a page with lots of binding and do a heap dump with the profiling tool like VisualVN, and you can search those objects with the keyword tracker or binding. So you can see those objects, the number of these objects, and how memory it consumes. The second benefit is to reduce the server burden. Because in server MVVM, when you use lots of bindings, you can need to create components and also those tracker nodes at server side. So it takes more time for server to create these objects. So we can see example. For example, first we create example of a server MVVM, and we remove this. So this is a server MVVM usage with a list box and create lots of list items at server side. So if we reload this page, so you can see it will take 287 milliseconds to reload this page because it will take some time creating objects, and also there's a render. It also takes 200 milliseconds. But if we turn this page into a client MVVM, apply this client by composer, now it becomes a client MVVM objects. So we use another page here. We reload again. You can see it takes 185 milliseconds. So we obvious decrease, and there's for those render is very short. It takes a very short time. So you can see there's a difference between this client MVVM and server MVVM with the rendering time. Okay, 280, 100. So that's a big difference. So especially when the number of components increase. Okay. So this is the second benefits. So the best use scenario is when one page with lots of low and safe bindings, then you will call lots of binding and tracker nodes. So that's a good case that you can turn that part into client MVVM. Or if you want page, it doesn't have too many load and safe binding, but it will be visited by massive concurrent users. That means every user will create a set of tracker nodes and binding objects with lots of concurrent users, then we create lots of bindings. So it's also suitable to convert or change this kind of page to client MVVM. So it doesn't fit every use case, but it will. I think the best use case you can turn into client MVVM is these two cases. And how do we use it or upgrade it? The step is to include the Zephyr jar, Zephyr EX jar. So let's check the project. We open the ZKX POM file. You can see we include this Zephyr EX jar. Now it's only available in ZKEE. So you have to, when you purchase the ZKEE, you will also have the complete source code. The second step, to add the listener for client MVVM, there's a special listener here, binder property renderer. So you can, let's see, you need to open the ZKXML and add this kind of listener here. And this listener will convert some binding informations into clients and transfer those binding information to client. So client will do the data binding for you. And the third steps is to activate the client MVVM. The first way is to activate globally. That means you will turn every page of MVVM, server MVVM, into client MVVM. This is not always work because I think there are some limitations. There are some problems when you try to convert all page into client MVVM because a client MVVM have some limitation. So it's not always work. So this is the way you can convert to activate it globally. For example, like here, you put a library property here, then you will enable globally. But there's a second way to enable it partially. So you can apply this kind of client by composer on a specific scope with a view model. Then you can turn that scope into client MVVM. For example, you can see our previous example here. If I remove this client by composer, then it's a server MVVM. If I add this client by composer, then it becomes client MVVM, and you don't need to change the syntax of the data binding. So you can apply this, and totally you can still create another this box that use the server MVVM like this. So it doesn't affect each other's. You can use server MVVM in one scope and use client MVVM in the different scope, even on the same page. Okay. So this is, I think most of you will choose these options because you can just selectively, partially convert some of this part into Client MVVM because it doesn't always work in all cases. So for current state, it's under development. So we welcome any feedback, and we might change upon your feedback during the development. So please try and give us feedback.